This session is just to catch up with you a little bit about Polyphony as a community, where we've been, where we're going next, and a really exciting initiative that my colleague Tim Sharp is going to tell us about. So that there's a little bit of the framing for that. Just before I jump into this, I want to say I wish you could have sort of sat in my chair and watched the registrations come in over the last 6 weeks. Sort of internally, my goal and the goal I had shared with a few of colleagues were, let's go for 50 this year. You know, can we get to 50? And you know, it got to 30, and then you know, by the way, this is Candy McComb on our Wilshire staff, our children's choir coordinator, and Candy is here with her husband Vic, who's a lawyer, and he just happened to have some clients in Atlanta, and so she said, "Can I come?" And I said, "I would love for you. I'd love for folks to know you, and you to know these folks." So I've been reporting to music staff. That's really my point. Every Monday when we meet, well, registrations are at 30. They're at 35. They're at 45. They're at 50. They're at 57, you know. And so it's been so exciting to see the response. And so thank you so much for being here and for taking the time to invest. With apologies to Stephen Hawking, a brief history of Polyphony. In 2007, a group of church musicians gathered at Mercer University, Atlanta, to try to figure out, where do we belong? Denominational resources were pretty meager. A lot of us belong to ACDA. Tim Sharp, thank you so much. Because Tim Sharp made us and our tribe welcome, I think, in ways that many others had not. And I, like you, like many of you, went to hear great choral music and to rub shoulders with great artists. But the truth of the matter is we're often lost in the crowd. It is what it is. You know, no judgment meant. And so out of this milieu, Polyphony was born with no staff, no institutional support, very little money, and yet we produce some very fine annual conferences. I wish Clark and Karen were already here. The first one was at First Baptist Asheville in 2008. How many of you were there? Yeah, look back, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But to be honest, this enterprise has waxed and waned. No judgment, just not a lot of help from other sources. No one's fault. Everyone is just busy. That's just life. Fast forward to 2020. A small group of us gathered at Mercer University in Macon, and thanks to David Keith and Stanley Roberts for giving us a nest to come into. And it was a very good gathering, though there were only about 20 of us there. I remember sitting by Kyle Damron at Margarita's, at a little Tex-Mex place in Macon. I didn't say with a margarita. I said at Margarita's, just about a block from the Mercer campus, and having a great conversation. And then we all go home. It's been a nice time. And I think, Kyle, Mark, others, 3 weeks later, we learn a new word, coronavirus, a word that we've come to detest. And then the experts started telling us it's dangerous to sing. What the? I mean, to quote Shakespeare, what fresh hell is this? I mean, really? And now I can't remember if Kyle called me or I called you, but one of us called the other, and we posed the question, what can we do to stay connected? How can we nurture, how can that little spark that was happening at Mercer in terms of building community, how can that become stronger? And so we started these bi-monthly Zoom calls that some of you have participated in for, almost 2 years now. And we've heard from folks who offered encouragement and resources like Eric Nelson and Lynn Gackle and Randall Bradley and Roger Holland at the University of Denver. But then sometimes we've just sat with each other with a cup of coffee and we've just had a conversation. And that too has been really, really good. And I would encourage you to be a part of some of just those coffee and conversations. I will never forget the day that a colleague from a small church west of Charlotte wept with us because her heart was breaking that her church was so divided over whether to wear masks and whether to be online or to be in person. And she was just exhausted by it all. And all we could do that day was to listen and pray. And sometimes that's what coffee and conversation is like on a Polyphony Zoom call. And so out of all the hardship of this time and the frustration and the exhaustion, which everyone in this room understands without me naming it, it seems to us that an authentic community is being born. Not one of competition. I think we've all grown up enough that we don't need to do that anymore. But one of collaboration and cooperation. So, where do we go from here? What's now and what's next? So let me talk to you about 4 things. And the 4th thing that I'm going to mention is when I'm going to segue to Tim Sharp and tell you about a really interesting initiative that's on the horizon. First and most obvious is just the relaunch of our Polyphony conference. And the fact that we have somehow figured out the right mix of location and presenters and space for building community. Well, and then you've shown up far more than we could have even hoped. And this works, and this is really good. We plan to make a decision really soon about next year's location and date. We couldn't quite get there. We've honestly been scrambling. We've been behind, just to make this happen. But Tim and others and I are already talking about where next year will be. There will be a next year. We're going to figure out the date together. Maybe we're going to get some feedback from you about the when of that. I'd just as soon not fight another winter storm. We're going to continue the bi-monthly Zoom calls, and I'm really happy to tell you today that this for 2022, Kyle Dameron has agreed to be our Zoom meeting coordinator. Okay? Thank you so much, Kyle, for your partnership already. He's going to run point on that. Like all of you, I've still got a day job. And so we needed some help. When you picked up your packet today, I hope that you picked up a flyer about some upcoming Zoom meetings. I think it'll be really interesting. Many of us have sung music by composer Dan Forrest. And if you don't know her, Carolyn Winfrey Gillette is a really interesting hymn writer who's writing some beautiful hymns these days. I remember the days of hearing about a legendary preacher who preached with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. I don't even know who that was. I almost feel like some of her hymns are like that. It's like she has the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. Kyle, there's something about what she's doing with these hymns that is so very current. So, would love for you to come be a part of that conversation with her. We're really convinced that our folks need connection. We need the encouragement of similar others. And I'm going to come back to that phrase because that's not original with me. Similar others. In other words, those who do what we do and understand our language, the art and craft of church music. And Polyphony wants to nurture that art and craft. Not only for those of us who are working, whether you're early career or mid-career or late career, but for those who will come along behind us. How do we sustain this legacy? So content and community are our watchwords. I recently had a Polyphony board meeting, and Maria Montero, who teaches at Baylor, is a member of our Polyphony board, and she said a beautiful thing that I thought captured the spirit of what we aspire to. And we may need to market this. I asked Maria's permission to share this. She crafted this. Come to Polyphony to find a brother or sister who will walk beside you. I really love that. Yeah. Third initiative is we're looking at launching a Polyphony YouTube channel. Doesn't everyone need a YouTube channel? You know. And we're going to use some curated content from Zoom calls and those sorts of things, but we're also going to play with the idea that this community is a company of experts. And we're going to figure out a way to affirm you and to showcase you and to let you offer your gifts and your resources. So stay tuned for that. As good as all of these ideas are, and I'm almost done here, Polyphony needs to understand what folks like us need as we emerge from this pandemic. What do you need to flourish? So what do you need so that you can flourish wherever God calls you? The Lilly Endowment has invested significantly in clergy and at what it takes for ministers to flourish. And one of the significant contributors to this research is Dr. Matt Bloom, who teaches at Notre Dame and who leads the Wellness at Work research program. By the way, he's got a wonderful book called Flourishing in Ministry. If you're interested in this subject, Tim and I have been reading it and sharing it. He also has this incredible app called Ritual. Really an interesting app on the topic of well-being, and it features guests like Barbara Brown Taylor and Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr, just among a few of the presenters that are featured in this app called Ritual. So through a friend, I was able to reach out to Dr. Bloom because the question that was plaguing me is, has anyone studied what church musicians need to thrive? And he was very generous with his time, and the short answer is no. As far as he knows, no organization has taken the time to ask what church musicians need to flourish. And so, Polyphony is going to do something about that. And at this point, I'm going to pass the baton to Tim, who has agreed to be the research project manager for an initiative that we are calling the Harmony Project. Will you join me in welcoming Tim Sharp?
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. And thank you all for, as we say to our servicemen and women, and thank you for your service. All of you that have out there laboring in these fields, and holy smokes, 2 years ago, I did a webinar with Nats and Barbershop Harmony Society and Chorus America, and the next morning I felt what it feels like to go viral. You don't want to feel this, folks. You don't want to feel it. 100,000 hits that evening on the webinar that basically broke the news that that we're in for something here. It was hard going for a while. It sounded like we just unleashed demons from hell, and we had. I mean, it was. But we said, I said on that webinar, what are we going to do about it? What can we do? And that's been my mantra since then. Got a call from Doug Haney. You guys got to give him a big hand. What a trooper. Good. I was on my back porch on my farm in Nashville, and he said, Tim, I want to ask you something. And that's where it began. Doug recognized that I've worked with 22,000 choral musicians for the last 15 years, and he thought maybe I'd have some insights into some of the things that we have to deal with. And sure enough, he resonated with me quickly because, and he didn't know at that moment how providential it was, how much it was God's leading. He didn't know. He had no idea. That's how God works. And we matched up two incredible missions on that phone that day. And Doug asked me this question: would you help us think about how we could do something with Polyphony? And what Doug didn't know is this: I had become the minister of music at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and that I had asked the church to go through the discernment process to ordain me as a minister, and I will be ordained in May of this year as a minister. Yeah. And people say, well, why now? I'm entering my third act right now. And right now, honestly, and we can talk about this over coffee, it would have been a distraction before now. And that's something I'd really like to unplug with you. But my years in ACDA, it would have been something of a distraction for me to be ordained. But now I am free. And I even think, honestly, I'll tell you this. I think my witness would have been diminished had I been ordained during that time. I think my witness was stronger not being ordained. Again, let's unpack that over coffee so I can tell you how I feel the calling now. But what Doug didn't know was either of those things, that I was at Emmanuel Baptist Church, a church, former Southern Baptist, right in the heart of Nashville. Most of my choir members are former Lifeway employees. We can unpack that over coffee if you want. But I tell you, Doug's point, and he introduced me to similar others on that phone call that day. And I realized at that point, again, what you all know so well, is I didn't know that was one of the three prime ingredients for happiness, is to be among similar others. We've spent so much time in the last 2 years looking at diversity and how we accept in diversity others, and we're working at that. We work every day at this. But the importance of feeding our soul with similar others, I had no idea. That led me to, on a journey that led to the word eudaimonia. You know what that word means? It means true happiness. Happiness, not ha-ha happiness, not fun and games happiness, but a peace in our soul that we are at peace with the world, we're at peace with ourselves, we're at peace with our family, we're at peace in our vocation. It is true happiness. It's a Greek word, of course, and it's the third element of finding happiness, and finding, the word that Doug used was thriving. How can we thrive as church musicians going into the next few years? And so that began our journey, and here's what we're going to do. We have talked to the folks, as Doug said, at Notre Dame. We have talked to Craig and Chris Adams. These are people that worked with Bloom on this study that was for pastors. And we are taking their wisdom, and we are really working hard at creating an instrument that I'm going to tell you about in just a second, that is going to find out something that we don't learn from pastors in terms of what's happiness in the pastoral world, or in the preaching pastoral world, let's say, or the lead preacher or the senior pastor. We're different in the music world. We work under that person in most cases, and so our happiness factors something in that person's happiness doesn't. And that makes, I think, Doug, in itself, that makes our study very, very valuable. So what I led, my study was, what I tell you about my ordination is this. It's not only because I get it as a person who graduated from Belmont University, a person who taught at Belmont University, graduated from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, that minister of music at Beechwood Baptist Church in Louisville, and then years later have come back to this tribe. I am motivated now because this is where I reside. So I'm not only motivated because I'm interested, I'm motivated because I really feel this is part of my thriving as well. So I have skin in the game, all right? And I think that's important for you to know in terms of motivational theory. Why would I do this? It's because I believe it's just as much for me as it is for you. I just hope I have, and I pray I have the tools, and I think we're going to get there in order to lead to what we think is going to be a transforming element for Polyphony. But let me read you the other two things, and I want Doug to speak to what we've done so far. I want to read to you the other two things. What Doug said about similar others is the third element in happiness. The first two elements that significant research has shown that contributes, is really a consensus that contributes to thriving in ministry, thriving in any vocation, is number one, that we have an overarching system of beliefs, values, and virtues that provide structure and guidance to life. Number one, you believe in something. You have to have something that guides you, your guiding star. We have that. I know you have that in your life. We have that going for us. That's a good thing. But the second thing is this. It is a sense that your work contributes to important life goals. And I think, Doug, that's the heart of the matter. The idea that what we do on a daily basis makes some difference that contributes to those values that we hold as our North Star, and that they arise from some purpose that we have for our life. And that's the study that I'm getting ready to undertake with you all and similar others. The third thing is experiencing strong, positive connections with other people. These are the values that matter to us in our happiness. When Doug asked me to start this study, what we really knew what we were going to do is I was going to end up surveying or creating an instrument that would survey a significant number of us to find out what are those things that contribute to a thriving music ministry and a thriving vocation. Sounds fantastic, doesn't it? But when you start getting down into the weeds, you start thinking much more specifically about, is it different with full-time people and part-time people? Is it different with this group of people than it would be another denomination? Is it different male-female? Is it different if you're family or if you're single? A couple of years ago, before we all got shut in, I was sitting at a table with one of the smartest persons in this room, Emily Floyd, and she said right off the bat, "You're an Enneagram 3 with a borderline 7." You remember that? And she was spot on. She knew within 2 paragraphs that I was a 3. Folks, most of us in this room probably are 3s. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of real similar others to what we do in this room. We're a lot alike because of what we were called to do and how we're made and our skill set. So it led to a lot of questions, didn't it, Doug? And so I wasn't satisfied that I could do this. So I said, Doug, what we need is a focus group of some really smart people to get together and to refine this into a mission statement and to what we really want me to do. I said, I'll fly to Dallas. If you can assemble those really smart people with me in that room, I'm gonna structure this thing, and we're gonna come up at the end of the day with a mission statement, a set of values. We're gonna have objectives, and we're gonna even have a tagline. We might even have a logo at the end of the day. And so, Doug, take it from the. I want Doug to tell you what we did, and then I'm going to tell you where we're going.
Yeah, just really quickly. So we did bring a group of folks together, a brain trust, to Dallas in October, and those folks were Candy McComb, whom I've introduced to you already on our music staff, myself, Tim, Marianne Hill is a member of our Polyphony board, is a really amazing lay leader at Wilshire for many years, now lives in Waco, and my colleague Carrie Cannon, who came up from Houston at the time. Carrie has recently come to Highland Park United Methodist Church in Dallas, so it's good to be neighbors again. Yeah. And just to summarize, the title of our research, which actually happened at the very end of a long conversation, but I think we had this kind of emotional resonance around this title, is going to be The Harmony Project. I think that's going to really have some interesting generative ideas that come out of that. Our tagline, which had already been using, but we really think is important and essential to our DNA, is as aspirational. Breathe, bless, be well. Breathe, bless, be well. The scope of the project is that we are going to interview 100 church musicians in sit-down or face-to-face or significant Zoom meeting sort of interviews to ask them the question, what do you need where you are to flourish and thrive in the 2020s? Now, part of that will have the sense that we're emerging from the pandemic, but at some point, I'd like us to recalibrate this as sort of a reaction to the difficulty of this pathogen and try to reframe it as, how do we imagine God's good future for us? Because there is a good future out there. And maybe lastly for now, the vision of this research project is to discover ways for church music leadership to thrive professionally and personally. Now, we may have gone from preaching to meddling at that point, but I am deeply and profoundly convinced that both things are significant, because we are human beings who are called by God to do this thing, and sometimes we thrive in our professional work and we don't flourish as well in our personal life. These things cannot be compartmentalized. I don't know what that means yet. That's just the wisdom of the group in this ad hoc group, that the vision of our project is to discover ways for us, for our tribe, for church music leadership to thrive professionally and personally. Tim, back to you.
So to that end, I'm like the pianist in the bar. He's here all week, folks. I am here all weekend, and I'm going to be hanging out in the hall. I'm going to be eating with you. I'm going to be staying in the hotel with same place many of you are staying. I am here to, first, I'm going to tell you where I am in the survey. I hope by the end of this weekend, I will be able to get enough of your trust for you to be at least the first 50 interviews that I do. All right? They're not going to happen this weekend. I don't have time. I would like to be able to interview you and another 50 church musicians like us in order to get at what Doug is talking about. Now, the nice thing is, for me is I don't have to get the cure. The cure will be Polyphony. That's our hope, is that over the next decade, this organization will speak to the things that we find out. But what I get to do is find out what are those things that you need to flourish and to thrive. Sounds like a fun job, doesn't it? But what I need is your trust, because in this anonymous survey and interview I'm going to do with many, many of you, I need for you to be frank. I need for you to tell me the real answers, the real things that are on your heart. And I'm going to do it in two ways. You're going to have, those of you that will contribute with me, I will have an instrument, a rubric, a protocol that I'm going to send to you and ask you to, sort of like my ordination council, a time of discernment to think through these questions, answer these questions, and then I'm going to see if you will please set up an interview with me in which I will unpack that. And I'll be listening for key words. But at the end, after I take all my notes and do all of my cataloging of what I hear, I will put that into areas that I believe will be something of a table of thriving to say, this speaks to this speaks to this. And I'll be looking for key words over many, many people. Now, I am really going after this tribe. So Doug knows that, and he and I are going to have a breakfast roundtable on Saturday morning, in which some of you, I hope, will join us on Saturday, because I'm going to be asking you for more input. But for just 2 minutes, Doug, I'd like to read through some of the questions that I've already pulled from the literature and from the work that I've done that will be a part of this interview.
So just to clarify one thing, both for me and for the group,
yes.
The survey you might be giving them is sort of a beta test in a way. This is not the ultimate interview, which will be much more lengthy and in-depth. Is that an
That's
accurate
exactly
way to say
right.
it?
I didn't want to dispose any of this before I came to this conference and talked to you all and got more input. So I'm not reading the final instrument. I'm reading where I am right now in my thinking. The interview begins to know how you became a vocational church musician, okay? I'd like to go back as far as you can and to work your way forward to say when you felt that call, what led you into this. I'll ask you different ways to describe what was happening in your life just before you made that decision. I'd like to have something of your sense of what that future work was going to be when you felt or heard that call. And what other events you might remember from that time. I'm going to ask you, were there signs, were there indications of that possible future? I'm thinking of asking you, what other events do you remember happening in your life at that time? They don't need to be directly related to the journey, but where were you at that time? What context? And for you, I'll ask, what have been the best parts of being a music director. I'll probe the life-enriching aspects of your work, what really stands out as hallmarks. What are the most meaningful experiences that you've had? How do you know when your work is going well will be one of the questions. I'll probe what helps you to be your best in your work. What kinds of things exemplify for you work at its best? Can you tell me a story that is an iconic story that says, this was that moment for me? And I'm listening and I'm taking notes and I'm listening for those keywords and those verbs and those nouns and those objects. Can you tell me that story in specific? I'd like to learn more then about the challenging aspects of your work. I want you to describe those for me and to probe what keeps you from doing your best work. What kinds of experience exemplify work at its worst for you? Can you tell me a story of that? Boy, that will be fun, won't it? Can you tell me? Can you think of a specific time that really is an iconic moment of work at its best and work at its worst for you? What kinds of relationships have had the greatest impact for you that has meant a time of well-being? And what relationships have been beneficial? Have there been relationships that have been especially difficult? Anyone that you might describe? What kinds of professional or life practices have had the greatest impact in your work? And what have you done to sustain your well-being during your work? And when you have had particularly bad times, what was it that got you through those? Have your experiences of music leading and arts leading and liturgy leading changed over time? Have you migrated? Have you moved from one person and outlook to another, and especially in ways that have impacted your well-being? These will be the general ways that I'm heading. Now, what I'm going to ask you all to do while I'm here all week is to tell me what you think, what is on your mind. We'll have this roundtable, Doug, Saturday morning. That's a formal time for we can talk as a group, but privately, if something comes to your mind, you want to steer me, offer me something, that's why Doug wants me really here, is to listen to you. We had thought about handing the survey out this weekend. Then we said premature. So we really wanted to stop here, get the input, and then let me reform it. I am not a behavioral psychologist. I'm not a Dr. Phil. I think I can be a good listener, and I think I can detect patterns and trends and key words. I do think I can do that, and I'll get help on that. I have already secured help to help me that are in the world of behavioral psychology. Doug, where will we go from here with that information?
Well, that's yet to become, and that's going to evolve probably over time. It may evolve in the next 48 hours, honestly. Yeah. When we get beyond this interview process, if you will, and then collate that material, I think we're going to suspend judgment on even what we think that will be. We might make some educated guesses, but we actually want to wait, because honestly, at the end of the day, what matters is what you think, or what you're willing to tell us you think, right? Once we have, though, this collated in some form of, report, a document, or whatever, that then in turn is going to really determine, I think, the future of Polyphony. Then that will become our blueprint for what is next. Is that a good place to land the plane, Tim?
Yes, let's land the plane right there with this word, just saying, in the long-term strategy, and he is a strategist, the long-term strategy is also for us to get funding for future projects. Am I premature?
Well, we're hoping for funding for this. So, but we're gonna get there. I have a lot of confidence that we're gonna get the funding for this. So stay tuned.
Well, and the funding to me is also to say, how can you get funding if you don't know what your constituency really needs to have a valuable experience together in a conference? Because what I heard Doug saying loud and clear is we don't want to just duplicate other associations.
Because we have wonderful partners like Youth Q, like the Center for Congregational Song, Jocelyn, still ACDA, still Choristers Guild. These are folks who are experts in doing what they do. So that's not the lane we want to occupy.
Right.
We're looking for a unique and different sort of lane to be in.
Is there an amen in the room? Is there a second to the motion?